President Ruto, welcome to India. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thank you very much for. It was a wonderful visit to India, and I'm truly grateful to the government, people, Prime Minister, President of India for receiving me and for all the conversations we've had and all the discussions that we've had. And I am very confident that it's going to be a new chapter in India-Kenya relations.
Tell me about your conversations and meeting with Prime Minister Modi. What is your equation with him?
We had a wonderful conversation with Prime Minister Modi. I have a lot of admiration for Prime Minister Modi, the way he has managed to pick up India and the way he is focused on matters that affect common people, and the way he believes, like me, in bottom up, trying to do what benefits the majority of citizens. And so we had a robust conversation on a wide-ranging subject of issues that are of mutual benefit between Kenya and India, ranging from agriculture. We are great agricultural countries, both Kenya and India. And we discussed about what we can do with the program that I have in Kenya, how I can work with India to escalate some of the things we want to do in the agricultural mechanization, vaccine manufacture, training of using the Leather Institute here and the Footwear Institute here for our leather program in Kenya. What we could do between our two dairy boards. And already there's been an interaction between our two dairy boards, and we have agreed on how they are going to work together on manufacture of vaccines, on working on genetics for our breeds, and also for manufacture of agricultural equipment. We have agreed on what we can do around trade in agricultural commodities. For the first time, we are exporting avocados to India from just 2 months ago. There are some tariff negotiations that Prime Minister Modi has agreed to consider. At the moment, avocados from Kenya is attracting about 30% tariff, and he has agreed to look at that so that we can use it to balance the trade between Kenya and India. We have agreed with him also on the program we have on universal health coverage in Kenya. There is a lot we can learn in the health space from India. India is a great country on matters health. Many Kenyans come to India to look for medical attention, and we have agreed on how we can work with them on the digitization, telemedicine, and we already have a program in Kenya for digitizing health services. We've already passed new legislation that will anchor our health provision in Kenya, and we have agreed on how we can partner and also build capacity for our medical personnel. India have a great experience. We've agreed that in Kenya we are going to reduce the bureaucracy to allow more Indian specialists to work with their Kenyan counterparts in our referral hospitals, in both public and private. We've also agreed that we will also eliminate bureaucracy for Kenyan health professionals, nurses, clinical officers, doctors to come for short courses in India, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. That will go a very long way in actualizing my plan on universal health coverage and making sure that we deliver health, especially from the bottom going up. As you are aware, we have this program in Kenya, which is truly bottom up. We have just enrolled 100,000 community health workers. In every village, there will be a community health worker because we want to build the system from down going up. We also had a robust conversation about digital government. India has made huge strides in making sure that they can deliver government service efficiently, cost effectively, and also eliminating bureaucracy and pilferage and corruption. That is precisely what I want to do in Kenya. Already we have digitized almost 90% of government services in Kenya, following in the footsteps of India. And we actually, I sent a team from Kenya about 8 months ago to come and pick learning lessons from India. We are actually sharing the same platform with India because when I consulted many professionals, they told me the place with the best tested system is India. And so we are using the Indian experience in our digitization of government service, in our unique personal identifier, the same way you have it here in India. And we've begun the process in Kenya of a digital identity. Of course, some people have taken us to court, but you see, it's the normal journey of a democracy. Some people will go, try test here, there. But what India has done is phenomenal. That even with a population of 1.4 billion people, because you can identify citizens digitally, you can deliver service much more efficiently. We've signed off an MOU between the Open University of Kenya and the Indira Gandhi National Open University of India to again build a collaboration that will leverage on experiences, especially from the long-standing delivery of courses digitally and online by the Indian counterpart. We also agreed that India will extend a credit line of about $250 million, which is about 38 billion Kenya shillings. That will go a long way in leveraging our food security intervention, especially around mechanization, improving the breeds we have, on matters to do with seed development, on areas of pulses, on areas of edible oil. We're going to be focused on sunflower. We're going to be focused on soya. And India has great experience. In fact, I was finalizing a small meeting with my team, and we have agreed that actually next week we'll have the first Kenyan team. I will be sending here the principal secretaries of 2 ministries to come just and conclude what we agreed, so that we can get to work, especially on the matters that we have agreed with Prime Minister Modi. So I had a wonderful experience with Prime Minister Modi, and as I told you, he is a great inspiration on what he does. And of course, I was asking him, well, it's tough, doing things for 50 million people. I don't know how he does for 1.4 billion. It's quite something.
What did he tell you that? The answer to that?
He gave me some tips, not for the media.
Not for the media?
Yes.
Right. Very interesting. It sounds like you got a lot of work done in a very short visit and a lot of deals. And as you were talking, I was wondering, a few decades back, the developing world was looking at Western models of development and of growth that were to be emulated. Do you think that now the India model is something that countries like Kenya and others resonate with more?
Well, we all share the same history. India was a British colony just like Kenya. And India was lucky to have made strides ahead of us. And so there is a lot of commonality. And in fact, that's what I was saying yesterday. There is a lot of commonality between India and Kenya. It's easier for us to work with Indian experience because we can relate to it. We have the same legal system. We speak English. We share a common history. We are neighbors, so to speak. So there is a lot that we share. And it is easy to relate to the progress India has made, because they were around the same spot with us a few years ago. So, yes, it is much more comparable. It's much more easy to learn from what India has done. And we are sharing experience. There are a few things India will learn from Kenya as we make this journey.
Sure. One of the key announcements yesterday was about fighting terrorism and defense forces of both countries coming together. And that's a very, very important subject for India, because we've been at the receiving end of state-sponsored terrorism from a neighbor that was not just supported but also funded, first by the US and now by China. Do you think the international community needs to do more to call out such actors?
Terrorism is a global phenomenon, and it's a crisis that affects many parts of the world. The same way India has suffered terrorism, we too have. We have neighbors that have serious challenges of terrorist groups in Somalia, in various parts of our region. And it's necessary that we build a coalition of countries so that we share experience, we share intelligence, we share information, we collaborate, we synergize so that we can deal with terrorism, because terrorism has no borders. There is no terrorism for developing or developed world. There is no terrorism for Kenya or India. Terrorists are terrorists. And unless we come together, we are most likely not be able to make as much progress in the fight as we should. Specifically because we share the Indian Ocean, and sometimes because terrorists use the oceans to block goods, to cause trouble. And so it is necessary that our defense forces from India and from Kenya work together to protect our sea routes, so that we can keep trade moving. And I must commend India for working with us in using their capabilities. They worked with Kenya to survey our maritime resources and to provide technical expertise for us to see what is the wealth of the resources that we have in our waters. And that information is useful to Kenya, because one of the areas that I intend to focus is the blue economy. And my estimation from the experts that I work with is that we could grow our revenues from blue economy from about 20 billion Kenya shillings to about 130, 120 billion Kenya shillings per year if we have the correct information. And working with India, we have managed to gather a lot of useful information for our blue economy, but also to deal with the challenge of terrorism in our waters.
Do you think that in the eyes of the international multilateral institutions, the Western-led institutions, all terrorists and all terrorism-related challenges are seen equally? Are they sympathetic to your challenges as much as they are to possibly perceived threats in the West?
Well, countries are driven by national interest most of the time. And that is why countries will relate, will react, will deal with situations with the perspective of their national interest. So they will not maybe necessarily, be as enthusiastic to deal with a certain situation because maybe it doesn't affect their interests as much as another situation. And that's the nature of the world, We have national interests, and then we have interests that converge and bring us together as humanity. Of course, we should be able to deal with terrorism as terrorism and work together, all of us, in a coalition as nations, as progressive people, to say no to bad people. But sometimes that's not the case. But I don't think blame game, finger pointing will do much. I think we just have to continuously, build a coalition, work together, like the way we discussed this with Prime Minister Modi. It will take us a step in the right direction. Then we will keep building these blocks until we manage the situation from where I sit.
Would you say the way to doing it would be to getting your rightful place at the table, at the decision-making table? Prime Minister Modi and India were instrumental in getting the African Union into the G20. Is that something that you discussed? And you think that is one way to sort of get the proper representation that Africa deserves?
That's correct. In fact, I did commend my brother Prime Minister Modi for his efforts in championing the place of Global South, and specifically the place of Africa in the global geopolitics. It is here in India that Africa got the opportunity to be a permanent member of the G20. And we believe that that positioning is going to not only bring voice, but African perspective into the conversation, and African interests and African issues into the equation. And it is one step in the right direction. We also discussed with Prime Minister Modi what we need to do about the United Nations Security Council.
Yeah.
That we need a much more democratic, a much more fit for purpose UN Security Council, because it cannot be that 5 countries somehow are the only ones who wield this much power, so much power, about issues that happen globally, complete with veto powers on blocking issues that they may not necessarily think that they are important, but it is a matter of life and death for others. So we are very well aligned with India as Africa, and as Kenya for that matter, on the reform of the whole UN system. The international financial architecture, you must be aware that this is one push that I have made, Africa has made, and we are building a big coalition. Initially, many people dismissed it, that this is not going to happen, but we became persistent. Today, when we had the COP28 in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, everybody had come round to say, okay, we think you have a point. We think it is time to rethink the international financial architecture. We think we need to democratize decision making. We think we need to build a bigger coalition and a new charter on financing, especially climate positive growth sensitive financing. So finally, through building a coalition, raising our voices, we finally are influencing the way the world looks at issues. So India is instrumental because India is a big voice. Prime Minister Modi is a very progressive voice. So his voice in championing the African cause at G20. The coalition was built to change the international financial architecture, complete with refinancing the multilateral development banks, and also making sure that we have new sources of revenue. It's a must that we have to discuss carbon trading, carbon taxation. In fact, we launched a program with France, Kenya, and a few other countries on now a framework that we will report 1 year from now on a new charter on carbon taxation, carbon trading, carbon pricing as new sources of revenue to fund climate positive growth. So this is, and of course, as I said, the UN Security Council. So we're discussing G20, we're discussing international financial architecture, we are discussing UN reform. These are all areas which we have common ground. Prime Minister Modi, myself, India, Kenya, Africa, Global South, we are all aligned.
Yes, and we've been telling our viewers about how you are leading the climate fight in Africa, and you hosted the first climate summit as well. I'll come to that. But you mentioned the global financial architecture. And from the joint statement, I see that it mentioned a project financing in Kenya in Indian rupees. There's been a lot of talk of that as well, of de-dollarization. Do you see a future not very far away, devoid of the hegemony of the US dollar?
I think what we must not bring an us versus them, these versus the other. We have no problem with the US dollar, but we want currency neutral trade. You know, we want to diversify currency. For example, for us in Africa, we are working with the Afri-Exim Bank to have a pan-African payment and settlement system where trade in Africa will be in local currency, you know, but the settlement can be done at a higher level by a centralized system. So Afri-Exim is providing a facility because we lose about $5 billion every year in Africa just in exchange rates, you know, between this currency and this currency and the dollar, this currency and the other one. So we are saying we want trade, we want commerce, we want transactions to be currency neutral. For us, we want to trade in our local currencies. And in fact, the conversation I was having yesterday with Prime Minister Modi is that even the facility that will be extended to Kenya, the $250 million facility, we want it in Indian rupees so that we can, why should we go and look for dollars when we can have the facility in Indian rupees? We have a lot of trade, you know, we have commodities, we buy in Indian rupees. Why should we change Kenya shilling to US dollar, from US dollar to Indian rupees? Why don't we just agree that we can do trade between Kenya in shillings and in rupees? So this is what the conversation we are having. Yes, there will be a monopolizing currency, you know, but the real aim is not to replace dollars with rupees or dollars with shillings. The real aim is we need to diversify currency. We need to neutralize currency so that we concentrate on doing trade rather than on currency exchange.
You recently also said that the world is now looking at Africa as an opportunity and not as a source of problems. And we see the growing interest. You know, there are European players like France, there's the US, there's China, there's Russia. Do you also then see a new scramble for Africa sort of taking shape?
Scramble would be the wrong word. Maybe, maybe a new focus. You know, what we are saying as African leaders is, and I will tell you what I have said often, that there is an African proverb that says, until the lion learned to write his own story, all stories glorified the hunter because he was the one writing. So this time round, we're going to write our own story. For a long time, people wrote stories about Africa. And they said Africa is a place of disease, poverty, conflict, problems. We're telling them Africa is much more than that. Africa is a continent of huge renewable energy resources, 60% of the world's potential. Africa is a region of 40% of mineral resources globally, including those that are important and significant for energy transition. Africa has 60% of the world's arable and cultivated land that can be used for smart agriculture to feed the world. Africa has the largest the youngest population globally at the mean age of 19 and growing. It's not only a workforce, but it's also a market. Africa has the largest natural assets for carbon sequestration. So we are repositioning Africa, not in the eyes of others who know very little about us, but in our own perspective, knowing exactly the wealth that we have. And we are saying that with these assets, we want to engage with the rest of the world in a win-win outcome. We want to work with others. We come with our assets. The rest of the world, we do not want to ask for favors. We do not want to ask for aid. We are not looking for donations, for that matter. What we want is an engagement on how are we going to create investment opportunities. It is the reason why in the COP28 in Dubai, we came as African leaders and we said, look, this is our Africa Green Industrialization Initiative. We have this investment grade, opportunities. You can invest in our renewable energy, geothermal, wind, solar. You can invest in value addition and processing of our minerals. We do not want to export iron ore from Mauritania or from Kenya or from another place to China or Europe. We are going to use our renewable energy to process our iron ore and sell you green steel. Yeah. We are not going to be exporting bauxite. We want to process our own bauxite and export aluminium. And we have supported, for example, Europe. We have supported other regions. We've given them our raw materials. And we have been very faithful. We have also bought their finished products. It is time that we exchange. That this time round, they buy our finished product and they export to us their technology, and we agree on an investment program. So we are changing the narrative for Africa, and we are repositioning Africa as an investment destination, not as a destination for aid or a destination for donations.
You've played a very active role and you've been in office not very long, but you're looking at helping Haiti by sending the police force from Kenya. You're looking at mediating in Sudan, in Niger. And your critics say that while you're looking at these international issues, you're probably not doing, according to them, enough at home. You promised to bring down the cost of living. Do you believe you've been able to make enough progress, and what is your response to people who say that you're not resolving the discontent at home?
Kenya is not an island. Mm-hmm. Kenya is a country in a context. To be able to get Kenya moving, we have to build a big coalition of support. India must be in the equation to support what we are doing. The US, others, China. We've built a big coalition, and that's my aim, is that the Kenya project is a project that goes beyond our borders. We have a big relationship with others who influence how much progress we make. Unless I build a big coalition of support for Kenya, we will not achieve what we want to achieve. And I have been very careful to balance all the issues, and everything I do, I have at the back of my mind the interests of Kenya. How do I use every opportunity to further the interests of Kenya? My trip to India, for example, has a lot, maybe everything, to do with the progress we made in Kenya. Sharing experience around our digital space, working with our agriculture, looking at our health. It's all about how do I position Kenya to leverage on experience, on capacity, on support from other countries. Cost of living. As you are all aware, as you are aware, that the cost of living is not a country-specific issue. The cost of living is a global phenomenon. I speak to many leaders across the world, and what they speak as though they are speaking for me, because it's a challenge we have to confront. Commodities went up because of the challenges we have with COVID and the war in Europe and on all that. But let me tell you, I did commit to the people of Kenya that my belief is that we have to enhance our production. We cannot continue to import stuff. And in fact, that's something Prime Minister Modi believes with the whole of himself. In fact, he has changed India from a net importer of rice to a net exporter of rice today. And that is the mission I have for Kenya. And you don't become a net exporter of anything by not concentrating on production. So my focus is, how do we support farmers? Let's reduce the cost of fertilizer. Kenyans will tell you, in the last 1 year, I have brought down the cost of fertilizer from 7,000 Kenya shillings to 2,500. In fact, this year, we have increased our production, for example, of maize by 40%. Increased by 40%. Because of the interventions I have put in place. That speaks the language of cost of living, because 50%, 52% of most households, their expenditure is on food. If you reduce the cost of food, you affect significantly their cost of living. The other intervention that we are working on is, how do we create more jobs? Because when you increase money in people's pockets, that is how you deal with the cost of living. In the last 1 year, because of the program we have rolled out, and I have 4 programs that I target to create jobs in Kenya. One of them is housing. We've already rolled it out. We have 120,000 people who were jobless a year ago. Today they have jobs. And my program is that in the next 5 years, I should have 500,000 people working in our housing plan. The other intervention that I'm working on is to make sure that we create more jobs abroad. We are working on 8 different bilateral labor agreements with Saudi Arabia, with the UAE, with Germany. In fact, I was in Berlin about 2 weeks ago, and that was a conversation between me and Chancellor Scholz, so that we can, because Kenyans are very hardworking people. Kenyans are probably the best workers anywhere. In fact, we have the best human capital, and we spend a lot of money sharpening it. We spend $5 billion every year to educate our children from primary school all the way to university. So, export of labor. I am targeting to export more Kenyans because they are a very good resource. And then we are working on the space of creating digital jobs, e-commerce, and making sure that we have more BPOs, business process outsourcing. We are expanding that space. And it's the reason why we are creating 1,450 ICT hubs across Kenya, right, to have more young people working. So I am thoroughly focused on making sure that I deal with the challenge of cost of living as I grow the country, Kenya. And finally, I am very well focused on reducing the cost of medical attention. You know, many Kenyans spend their life savings, sell property, they sell their valued assets to go to a hospital. And it is the reason why we've changed the law around delivery of health. We have new 4 laws now that I have signed into place, and we are rolling out universal health coverage. This is a program we have tried and failed twice. I want to promise you and promise the people of Kenya that we will not fail this time, because I am certain, I am clear on how we will drive this to make sure that the people at the bottom of the pyramid pay less, and progressively we make sure that health delivery leaves nobody behind. And bring integrity into the whole system, because we want to get rid of pilferage, we want to get rid of wastage, and that is why I am digitizing and learning from India to digitize the whole health space to make sure that delivery is cost effective, it is efficient, and it is corruption free.
I think your message is reaching out to, we have millions of viewers in Kenya, and it is going to them, and I cannot let you go without asking you about the role of Indians in Kenya in cementing this relationship between the two countries. That is my final question.
We have a great Indian diaspora in Kenya. They have worked with us since 1911. They came to build the railway, and they found that there was a great place to stay. So they chose to stay with us in Kenya. They are now very good business people, very good farmers, very good citizens, very good leaders. In fact, we have many of them in our parliaments and in our other institutions, and in the private sector, in the public sector, we are working with them. So the Indian diaspora are a great resource to Kenya. They bring on board the diversity of Kenya, and today they stopped being Indians. They are now Kenya's 44th tribe, and they are perfectly Kenyan with us. And they've been a great bridge between India and Kenya.
Some of them are friends and they call Kenya home.
Yes.
So I've heard great things, but thank you so much for your time, President Ruto. I know you've been pressed for time, but you've made time for us, and it's been a great conversation.
Thank you very much, my dear. Yeah.